Hi everybody, it's Sarah and it's Fabulous Friday, and today we're talking about impulsivity and sort of getting to a place where you can stop yourself before you act impulsively, before you say something impulsively, before you behave impulsively, and eventually before you even think impulsively. And impulsivity is something I'm very, very familiar with. It goes with the borderline territory. And there's good news about it. Good news is that it doesn't get worse. It's probably one of the only things that I have found got noticeably better with very little effort. So with the DBT, so the dialectical behavioral therapy, and with time and mastery, which is one of the skills for dialectical behavioral therapy, I got to a point where impulsively I wasn't behaving that way anymore. That I could buy enough time to stall my emotions enough so that what I was saying, what I was doing, what I was, choosing for myself was a lot more positive and a lot more constructive because I was taking the emotional side out of it. One of the things that we can do is we can use certain tools to put those roadblocks in place so that your emotions aren't running away with you, because that's the main driver of impulsivity, and it's not a flaw. It's as humans, we're wired to be impulsive. We're wired to seek what we need and what we want, and we're wired to seek it now, which is the definition of impulsivity. So, some people just have a little bit better control on that, and some people don't, and the people that don't just need to learn how. This is definitely not a life sentence. So if you find yourself saying things impulsively and you're like, oh my god, I really probably should not have said that, there's an acronym that goes think. So before you speak, think. And you think about, is it true? Therefore, starting with the T, is it true? The H stands for, is it helpful? The I stands for, is it inspiring? The N stands for, is it necessary? And the K stands for, if it's kind. And so, if what you're saying doesn't fit those parameters, then you probably need to rethink either saying it or rethink the way you're saying it. Everything can fit into that model. Everything can fit into something that is true and helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind. So that's one of the tools that I've used in terms of speaking impulsively. Another one of the tools that, in terms of acting impulsively, is a pros and cons chart. And this is something that goes along with the distress tolerance module of DBT. And basically, you separate your decision into two chunks. So, am I going to do this, or am I going to do that? So let's say I'm deciding, or I'm thinking about dropping something out of school. Is that an impulsive decision, or is it not? Well, I take the first scenario, which is dropping the course, and I evaluate all the pros for that. So what are the pros? The pros might be that I have more time, that I have less stress. The cons to that would mean that I might have more time, that I need to fill in a healthy way, I won't get the credit. And then you reevaluate the other situation. So the situation of not following through on that action. And you evaluate the pros. So if I stay and take this course, what are the pros of that? Well, I get the course, I get the material, I get the credit, all that kind of thing. And then what are the cons to staying? Well, there is some time investment, there is some effort investment, and then after I've evaluated everything on each of its extremes and evaluated all the options in between, which is a step beyond the pros and cons, then I've decided whether or not that decision is in my best interest. And if it's in my best interest, then I can go on and continue with it. And if it's not, then maybe I need to reevaluate before I act on it. So those are the two main skills that I use, is the think before you speak and the pros and cons. A lot of times when we're having symptoms and that kind of thing, we're not thinking at all. So just buy that time to think, no matter how often or how long that is. Even if you only think for like 10, 15 seconds, that's better than not thinking at all. And you start entertaining the idea of having other options available. Other options that are not as impulsive and not as self-destructive. In terms of impulsivity and around urges, one of the things that I have found extremely helpful is getting rid of sharps. I don't want them around. I don't need them around. If I'm in a position where I need to do that, then there's a pharmacy down the road, like 3 blocks. I can go get what I need there. The other rule I have in place around self-harm and impulsivity is that I'm not allowed to do it in my apartment. My apartment is a safe place. So I have to find somewhere else to do it, which makes it very inconvenient. So if you know you have a tendency towards some of these impulsive behaviors, putting those roadblocks in place, those physical roadblocks, will help buy the time that you need to make those mental roadblocks. And to sort of decide mentally, this isn't the best option for me. What are some other ones? So the physical roadblocks are definitely helpful. You just can't rely on them because physical roadblocks are always available to get rid of. If you want something bad enough, you'll get it. But at the same time, having that physical roadblock as a stalling measure so that you can think about things a little bit more is great. Now, the problem with thinking is that you don't want to mull over things either, or start, thinking about things too much so that you get into a negative headspace. So it is kind of a balance, but if you are someone who has a tendency towards impulsiveness, you're probably not going to be dealing with the same sort of challenges as someone who tends to think things over to like the extreme before they get to a position where they can make a decision. I've never met anybody like that anyway. Someone who has a problem with impulsivity but also can't make decisions. I'm sure it exists, but it's the exception, it's not the rule. In my experience anyway. And make sure you think before you speak. Make sure that you're using pros and cons and a lot of the other DBT skills that are in the distress tolerance aspect of it, aspect of the module, and just make sure you're thinking and sort of start developing that skill of thinking without also being emotional, because that's what leads to impulsivity. So I hope everybody had a good week, and I will see you next week.